Speaker starts that way, but for me it really is. This is my passion. I'm a emeritus professor, which has one incredible privilege, and that is I get a parking permit that can be used anywhere on Boise State's campus. It's fantastic. Other than that, I'm now free to really do whatever I want in my life for what's left. And that's, for a lot of people, actually pretty frightening. They think they're going to go and play golf and fish, and those are fantastic activities when you intersperse it with work. But if that's all you do, time quickly you start looking for something else. So I can pick and choose what I do, and I choose to keep working with the Executive MBA program at Boise State, which is, I think, a very exciting program. Jason's one of our very first graduates. Yeah, and I think the program can stand and fall by Jason. I had to pause a minute to be sure of that. But we teach from a very active-oriented approach. We have lots of projects. And we teach innovation by immersing our students into a startup process, not, I think, dissimilar to what you're doing. So in about a 10-week process, they go from not having a clue what they're going to do, coming up with some ideas. Now we go through a fairly systematic process where they really study the user and create a map of the user's world and try and really become anthropologists. And then they work out what job does this user really want doing. And they're trying to find a 5x, 10x job, something that makes a tremendous difference to that person's life where they don't really have a good alternative. And then they move on and they develop a business plan, and we bring in some angel investors. Kevin's done this a few times, and they kind of vote up or down. And one thing I learned is that there's no telling which way they're going to vote. There's very little inter-rater reliability, we would say. It's not easy. Most people get it wrong on both sides of the guess when you're looking at a very early stage business. And we know there's a reason for that. That almost no business plan survives first contact with customers. And they have to, the buzzword is today, they have to pivot and change rapidly. So I've become very interested in that process, and from being a member of the Boise Angel Alliance, which is kind of an umbrella organization for angel investors in Boise. There's a couple of funds. We kind of fund early stage businesses, not businesses that are just conceptual, ones hopefully that have some customers and some early traction, but have a lot of promise. So if we put money into it and time and effort and diligence and support, we hope that that can really scale rapidly and become one of the very few but very important rapid fire growth businesses. So that's what I've been doing and why I'm interested in what you guys are doing. And one of the things, I'm really a bit of a fraud here because I'm not a real entrepreneur. I've been involved in startups as an investor, but I'm an academic, I'm an educator. And that brings some similarities to entrepreneurs. We both have very short attention spans, I find. And I can keep going from topic to topic, and they can keep going from business to business. But I'm not as action-oriented as a Jason or a Steve Hodges. Kevin's a weird hybrid. I'm not sure which camp he falls. But real entrepreneurs are action-oriented. They like to wear out shoe leather and get out there and try something. And they're the kind of people I love to watch and study and understand how they do it. And from people like me who've been researching entrepreneurs, we've made a fantastic discovery. And that is what we've been teaching for 100 years in business school. Is not only doesn't fit, is inappropriate for a startup. That a startup is not a small, big company. And risk is managed in a totally different way. But the problem is angel investors have copied pretty much the venture capital model. And the venture capital model is based on business plans. It's based on MBA type thinking. And a lot of them are extremely good at least in terms of being able to analyze and talk about a business plan. In terms of their record, not very good. Venture capitalists are really not the people you want to be copying if you're looking at their record. Recent research has shown very low return on invested capital and very poor probability of the guesses they make. Only 11% of the firms that are funded by venture capitalists actually are bought and acquired by another firm. And yet we routinely, as angel investors, think that every investment we're going to make has a good chance of being bought out by somebody someday. But the real problem is that big firms manage risk in an entirely different way from little firms, or should do. Big firms manage risk by trying to do what they already know a lot about and trying to replicate a proven business model. And therefore, if you're pitching for money in a large company like Simplot or HP, you're pitching for something in a known area, typically, something where you've got data that you can really back up your pitch in terms of what customers want, the proven increments usually that they're looking for, and the return on investment that you can promise. And big companies are trying to move large amounts of money to get reasonable, risk-adjusted return on investment. Now, small companies don't have a business model, typically. They're in search of one. Small companies have a ratio of about 95% unknown to known. So you cannot manage risk by just trying to do a great business plan. That simply doesn't work. And in fact, we'll get to how you manage risk and how really good entrepreneurs have always managed risk in a little bit. But before I get to that, I want to talk about the mind, because we know a lot more about how the mind works. And in the early stage of a business, think about it, that's your main tool. That's what you're working with. You're working with your minds. And our minds are wonderful instruments, but they didn't evolve for this task. They evolved to escape predators and to capture prey on the Sahara in Africa. So I want to give you a little puzzle first. And I want you to think about who this person is, Linda. And I'll read this out. Linda is 31 years old. She's single, outspoken, and very bright. She majored in philosophy. As a student, she was deeply concerned with issues of discrimination and social justice, and also participated in anti-nuclear demonstrations, because that's who Linda is. Now, I want you to think, which is more probable? A, Linda is a bank teller. B, Linda is a bank teller and active in the feminist movement. Now, which came to mind first? B. Okay. Now that is your system one, as we call it, working. We have two cognitive systems. The first system is extremely fast. It's so fast it's effortless. We really don't think when we use our system one cognition. And it's the dominant one that we have. It's what we use for recognition. You know, you can go out of this building, you could probably recognize me a couple of days later in this high street and say, hi, you were the guy who was talking the other day about Linda, right? And I said, yeah. And then, how did you recognize me? Well, you wouldn't be able to tell me. You know, we've all got eyebrows, noses, mouths. My hair color's a little different from most of yours. But you would be sure that you could recognize me, but you couldn't tell me how. That's your system one at work. That's flash pattern recognition is what that is. It's associative memory. And our brains are largely wired in that direction to do quick, flash, intuitive judgments. And by and large, they're good. We wouldn't survive if they weren't largely good. But it can mislead us. Now think about this slowly for a minute. It would be impossible for Linda to be a bank teller, right? And to be in this and these options, A is far more probable than B, isn't it? Because if she is a bank teller and a feminist, she is by definition in the first category, right? She's a bank teller. Now you all know that. You slow down, you look at that, you say, no, that's true. But I've still got this image of Linda in my mind, and bank teller doesn't fit. So what do? We had this prototype, this image that we had of Linda. And it didn't have anything to do with being a bank teller. It had to do with being a philosophy major, being active in social issues, and demonstrating. And that fits very well as a quick pattern matching with feminist movement. So we came down and we said feminist movement. That's our intuition at work. Now we have a second cognitive system. Kahneman calls it system 2. It's very slow, it's very ponderous, it's painful. So I'll give an example. System 1, if I say, what's 2 plus 2? Effortlessly, your mind says 4, right? If I say, what's 17 times 23? Anyone got an answer? Okay, now with a piece of pen and paper, we could get it pretty quickly, couldn't we? We'd go through 3 operations, we'd add them together, and we'd have a number. But our mind can't do that very quickly. It's very slow, it takes a lot of effort, and most of you didn't try, right? You kind of, well, 17 times 23, so 17, well, let's say 230 is 10 times 23. I can do that, but can I remember that, and 7 times 23, and can I add those together? We couldn't survive if we lived using that second cognitive system. It's so slow, it's so painful, and we try and minimize how much pain we go through in our daily lives. It would be very painful for every judgment, every decision to be that way. Now, as an entrepreneur, you're dependent on both of these. You need to evoke your system 1, your intuition, to come up with ideas, to understand a potential customer, to look beyond what already exists and think what could exist, and to match those up. But on the other hand, what we find with intuition is that it's phenomenally effective when it's well grounded. So for instance, a fire chief can go on the roof of a building that's on fire, and he can suddenly shout to his fire crew, "Get off this roof." And if you said, "Why did you say that?" He said, "I just felt it was going to blow," and then the thing blows. Well, how did he know? Well, maybe he felt a bit of heat on his foot. Maybe he smelt something that felt like it was about to combust and really blow. But he'd had 23 years of pattern matching, and he knew exactly what he was looking for. And he responded as quickly as we respond in recognizing a face. That is well-grounded intuition. Unfortunately, intuition can feel equally compelling to us when there's no ground to it whatsoever. An 18-year-old girl who's madly in love with a boyfriend. Parents, take your time, honey. Don't be, there's other people to maybe meet first, but she is convinced. 18-year-old boy, because it's not just girls. An entrepreneur who's just got a great idea fits into this camp too. What happens when we have a great idea? Well, what happens is we shut system 2 down and anyone else who wants to employ it around us. We then start looking for confirming evidence. Think about the Linda problem. When you had the Linda in your mind, you were looking, now does 1 or 2 better match my image of Linda? Or 2 is a better match? Feminism. But 1, if we slow down and think about it in terms of the probability, is much more likely. Okay, so the problem with ideation is if we just throw out ideas and then we focus on ideas, we start convincing ourselves of the wisdom of those ideas. And then we start looking for evidence that supports it. And then we start pitching to investors, and as we pitch our idea, we become more and more and more convinced of its correctness. And we then find that we're willing to put very high valuations on it. Now, you'd think for an entrepreneur, it's always better to get a really high valuation. Later on, I'll argue why that's really not the case, because you've got to live by the plans that are grounded on that valuation, and they're often impossible. But we have tremendous overconfidence often in our intuitions. So what we know about ideation processes, from those who are really good at it, is that they have learned to delay that flash of ideation. It's really a paradox. The best way to get great ideas is to delay having ideas. That seems ridiculous, doesn't it? I mean, you think the obvious way to have great ideas is to start having them, throwing them out. Well, you're in the early stages of your teams right now. Well, let me describe a few kind of dysfunctional things that often happen in early stages. One is, I call it the Pied Piper syndrome. One person's got a great idea, they're sure of it, they're walking along playing a tune, often the leader in a company, and the others are following. Well, the leader knows where he's going, so we'll just follow. Usually that's not a good recipe for really being creative and being careful. The other is jump ball. You know, in basketball, you jump ball, whoever jumps highest gets the ball. Jump ball in an ideation session, whoever captures airtime and gets attention, it then becomes a problem for other members of the team because, well, do I want to challenge that person? Do I really want to do that? I'm not sure if that's the right idea, but boy, we've got a deadline and we might as well go with that. Okay, that's jump ball, not a very good process. Tag teaming. Someone says, well, here's my idea. Someone says, great idea, let's do that. Someone says, no, I think I prefer this idea. And the team kind of becomes divided. So we find always that the toughest part of these projects that you're on is the very early stage before you've got a really good grounded idea. That feels wrong. It really feels wrong. Think about what feels right when you're in a team. In a big company, in a university, in most team sessions, it feels right when you're making predictable, steady progress towards a goal. And you can say at the end of the meeting, this is what I've achieved. When you come out of a meeting and you've been putting things all over the place and you've got no conclusion and you spend another week, that feels wrong. But actually early on, it's right. It's kind of a paradox. It's like pilots, when their plane is stalling, the correct thing to do is to put the nose to the ground, dive towards the ground to build up speed, and then regain altitude. What every inch of your body wants to do is to pull on that joystick to go up. You don't want to go down, you want to go up. That intuitively feels right, but it's totally wrong. So it's interesting if we think about ideation as a real process. By the way, mostly I think it's a buzzword that doesn't describe a real process. But for a few places, it is a real process. And one of them are the really top professional design firms. Now they've got a heck of a challenge because they make their living by other firms contracting with them to come up with really great new products and services that they pay for. And most of these all fail. So they have to be really good at what they do. And the one that's kind of pioneered a process I'm going to talk about in a minute is called IDEO. And they've developed a process called design thinking. But it's pretty easy to describe what they do, but very difficult to actually do it. They never, in their process, start with an idea. They start with a problem. So the first place to begin is, can you find a customer, a user even, who has a problem? And ideally a 5x problem. Now you might be that customer. Actually, users are a great source of innovations. So sometimes problems that you have as a customer might be a good starting point. Or you find another customer, another user, who is in your zone of competence is a good thing to think about. Now, what happens when you just say, have a blank sheet of paper and come up with ideas? Well, there's no constraints, so there's no limits on bad ideas coming in. I nearly always start my process with the embers in the spring. Surprise, surprise, people always have some proposal for lawn mowers. They've just got them out, they've just started them out, they're just cutting grass. One team of engineers wanted to redesign lawn mowers. Said, you got 10 weeks. You know, look in the mirror, and if Sir James Dyson is not staring back at you, forget it. And it took him 13 years to reinvent the vacuum cleaner. Another would start off with, well, dog poop on the lawn. Yeah, that's a nuisance problem. Is it a 10x problem? I don't know. They came up with a wonderful idea of spindles that would spin and propel dog poop off the lawn as missiles, maybe into the street. I don't know, stones as well. You know, brilliant what the mind can come up with, no constraints. But you need constraints. So you've got to start with the user and really look at that user. Don't just ask them what their problem is, because typically they'll tell you what already exists. What you have to do is study that user like an anthropologist would study a new tribe, and really try and figure out what does that world look like. So we'll do a few things to get us going along that path. Now, ultimately, there's three things that have to come together for a viable startup. You've got to find something that's very desirable to the user. That's a human factor issue. What really matters to that person and in what context does it really matter? And they've got to be in pain. Otherwise, there's thousands of other options for spending time and money than you're proposing. It's got to be feasible, and I'm not going to talk much about that. But it has to be feasible. You've got to have some solution. And today with our software and our very cheap hardware, it's possible to make all kinds of wonderful solutions very cheaply. The hard thing is really matching it to something someone really needs. And finally, it's got to be viable. We've got to work out that it is really a viable business. You can have great needs and viable solutions, but they can't afford to pay, or there's not a way that we can deliver it. I often have students come up with all kinds of ideas for beating Apple or Samsung in iPads and phones. They may be great ideas, but there's almost never going to be a viability around that if you're going head-to-head with an Apple or a Samsung or any huge incumbent. So you've got to have a viable business model, but the place to start with design thinking is start with the users. Start with someone who's got a problem. And try and push aside for a bit, at least, your concern with viability and feasibility. Now, here's an example of how our mind works. When an airline looks at how can they compete more effectively with our customers, this is more or less their point of view. This is what they deliver. They deliver an experience on the plane. They also, of course, deliver ticketing experiences and so on, but mostly that's out of their control, what happens in the airport. And this is what they focus on. And pretty much we vote, because we don't have great options, we vote on price. So we have this weird thing of seats getting smaller while American derrieres are steadily getting much bigger. So it's strange. It's hard to make another vote. We look at this where our mind is looking at this particular problem. Someone's looking at his laptop, so we might not even think about an airline. We might think about how do we put a screen on that laptop. But really what we have to do when we're doing design thinking is look at the whole journey map. Now if we start thinking about international travel, business travel, let's say that's our customer. Well, there's a whole lot of things before and after when we fly. We have to, well, there's things before we drive. We've got to figure out our itinerary, where we're going. By the way, this new Apple Maps, don't use that. I've just uploaded to that, and I found something interesting. Boise's quite good. Apple Maps on Boise is quite good. Apple Maps in Orange County, where my oldest son lives, is very good. Where my dad lives in England, Pinnington, it does not exist. And if I went a drive-by-drive direction to his address, it would take me into a different town. And people are Googling, or of course they're Googling, all over the place and posting, particularly from overseas, some of the awful things Apple Maps is doing. But we might use, before we go anywhere, we might be using internet resources or a travel agent or someone to help plan this trip. But then we go to drive, and Boise, we're spoiled. We drive 15 minutes, we're at the airport. Washington, D.C., that's going to be 45 minutes. London to Heathrow from downtown, you better allow an hour and a half. So you've got a lot of activity before you're at the airport. Heathrow, now at London, is advising 3 hours before the flight that you should arrive. You're going to queue, you're going to wait, you're going to queue, you're going to wait. You're going to fly, you're going to wait, you're going to rent a vehicle, you're going to drive, hopefully find your destination. So there's a whole set of opportunities if we're trying to innovate in this business that are much, much bigger than our first point of view. And we've got to find a high leverage alternative. Let's brainstorm some. What might an airline, we're limited to an airline now. If they're trying to innovate new value, and we have, when we do a journey map, we call this, and we look at experiences, we have to put pictures of users up and user quotes. It wouldn't take long to find all kinds of grief going through that journey map. Not a good experience for most people. A lot of stress. Well, they have only got limited options in airline. They buy the same planes. They fly from the same airports, more or less. They don't usually control customs. But there are some options. One airline, a subset of British Air, actually did something very clever. They flew out of the City of London airport, which is downtown. Now it's got a tiny little runway, but it's very close to the financial district. And you can't fly to New York from the City of London. But you can fly to Shannon Island. And Shannon Island has a deal with the US Customs that people can go through US Customs in Shannon Island. So they fly a small plane to Shannon Island. People go through customs where there are no lines, no queues, just custom officials. They then get back on the plane that's been refueled. It flies to New York, and they get off at LaGuardia and don't have to go through customs. It's brilliant. Virgin Airlines, competing with the great monster British Air. Weird name for an airline, if you think about it, Virgin Airlines. Wouldn't you rather have an airline that's been around the block a few times than a Virgin? But they focus on trying to give fantastic experience for their business class travelers, upper class they call it, typically English, and in a clubhouse. So they've got snooker, billiard tables, they've got a great bar, they've got even pods you can go in to have a sleep. And if you land in London, they've got, if you don't rush through the customs, they've got showers and a breakfast to have there. So they've kind of figured out what can we do for that 2 to 3 hour wait where we've got people prisoners. If we can make that a really good experience, that's far cheaper than replicating that on the plane itself. And yet it adds a lot of value. So mostly it's the methodology I'm encouraging. Think of, there are thousands of tools in design thinking, but one that's really helpful is to do a journey map. Find that user you're interested in and do a day in the life, a month in the life, over time of that person. What sequence of activities do they go through? Now I'll give another example. This is from the Stanford Design School, which is staffed by a lot of people from IDEO. And they've got a fantastic program where they teach graduate students design thinking. And those students come from business, from engineering, from architecture, from all over. They have no classrooms that look like normal classrooms. Everything is learned through doing projects. And they do projects that students are passionate about. Now this is in Palo Alto, California. You'd think, well, they're all passionate about making fortunes. Well, kind of, but they also, right now, have got a huge amount of social passion. And they have a lot of projects that look at third world challenges. So this is a field in sub-Saharan Africa. And they know the problem. The problem is there's a pitiful yield out of farming in this region. And the farmers are so poor that they're pulling their kids out of school when they're 13, 14 to work on the farm. And it's sub-subsistence farming, not even subsistence. So they're trying to figure out, what can we do? This is not a new question. We've poured billions of dollars in aid in that direction. And typically we end up saying, you buy our seed, you buy our Caterpillars, you buy our John Deere, we throw our technology out. Well, when you look at a problem like this, from a design thinking point of view, you've got to, let's do the same thing here that we did with the airline problem. So what do you think, how would we plot out a journey map for this farmer? What would be the sequence of things that we would want to know about? Any thoughts on that? He wakes
up in the morning.
Sorry?
He wakes up in the morning.
Yeah, he gets up in the morning, goes out to the field. Maybe we could have a crop sequence from you know, planting the seed, where do they lose it, and then eventually it's going to go to market, right? And we're going to have that journey map, so from seed to crop to harvest to market to sale. We've got that whole sequence of things. We could have a day in the life of, too, so we can see where time is going and whether it matches up. What we quickly learned from that activity is that what happens here is not the point of high leverage, but it's what we first of all look at. So we think, well, how about seed? Maybe seed that's more drought resistant. Or how about irrigation? Well, they can't afford electric pumps, there's no electricity, but there are some fascinating bicycle type pumps that they're brought in that make a difference. But all of those come back to the problem. First, you have to make some money to buy even the cheapest equipment. So what in fact they found was 50% of the crop is lost between the field and the market. That it rots, that bugs get on it, that it's in open baskets and bacteria is developing. So that's the point of greatest loss. So we need some means of storing it. Now our minds, you know, would go to what we would use. We can't really help it. We might think, well, how about a crop cellar might be good, or some refrigeration process, some cooling process. Well, here's where we've found a job that needs to be done. This is the buzzword we use. And the job is we need to store food so that we reduce the loss between harvest and the market. That's our job to be done. Then we brainstorm around that, try and think of lots of alternatives. But before we do, we need to define constraints. What are the limits? That's part of understanding our customer. How much can they pay? How do they want to use it? Who is going to use it? And we find that this is really tough. Children have to be able to use this storage mechanism, whatever it is. It has to be less than $20. That's the most they can afford, even if there's a huge payback. They can't get more than $20. It's got to be extremely simple and made out of local materials, because they have nothing tradable in this region. It's got to be done locally. That actually is very tough, but really good solutions come from really tough constraints, and it's part of what makes a really good ideation process. When you understand your customer, you can define in detail what are the key constraints. Then let the ideas storm. But if you have ideas storming before you really understand the problem and the customer, you'll tend to go down the wrong path. This was the eventual solution that is really transforming farming in sub-Saharan Africa. It's called the Zer pot. It's extremely simple. You've got an earthenware pot, and they make those locally, so that's great. You've got a pot inside of it with sand around it, and you then pour water in the sand, and it evaporates, and as it evaporates, it has a cooling effect, and you put a little sack on top, and lo and behold, you can store food for 5 days with this method. Not only that, you get a run-on effect, and that is you can get female entrepreneurship in the region. This is rather sad for men in a way, but the statistics show that for new money that comes in from entrepreneurship in sub-Saharan Africa or most of the third world, if it comes into men, 30% goes back to the family. If it comes into women, 65 to 70% goes back to the family. So that money is going to recycle and kind of have a multiplier effect. Now I want to look at what might be more familiar territory, how we might use a journey map in looking at an entrepreneurial opportunity. And when you start with ideas, you probably come up today probably with apps. You know, that's the #1 category. And they have phenomenal economics. They are fantastic. If you can get a software solution, you know, it's a miracle. You've got fixed costs and very little variable costs down the road, and the returns can be, as we know, absolutely fantastic. The challenge is, if you go back in time and you say, well, what happened when railroads were exploding in the United States, and it was the dream technology of its era, opening up the whole continent to commerce? Well, I did a bicycle ride on the Hiawatha Trail this summer. Did anyone do that? You go down through a big tunnel. Well, I got a great poster there. The Milwaukee Railroad went bankrupt 13 times before it was built out. That's what happened. You had a boom and bust period with the railroads. We had with electric motors when they came in and transformed society. We had a massive explosion in startups in that area, and then a massive collapse and shakeout until we had General Electric and a few others. Now that doesn't mean that transformational technologies are not good places to work. They are. But they work an awful lot better if you can find a really pressing need to apply them, rather than just think, because you and a huge crowd of people are going to be chasing the same place if you go for the general market. So again, if you're going to apply technology, you sometimes have to look in unusual places. Now, if we look at this problem that is faced all across the country every day, in this case it's a shipping company that has to clean its trucks. But it could be a food processing company that has to clean every night all its factory equipment, or a wood processing company who has the same cleaning problem. Every day, someone or other is doing this task. Now, this is what they want to do, is just get a job done, get the truck clean. But before they can do that, they have to buy. Cheapest way is to buy commodity chemicals, store them, mix them, because detergents are really not all the same. If you're trying to move blood and guts from machinery, you need a different detergent than if you're trying to move metal filings and wood products. So they mix them, try and get it right, clean the truck, store the empty barrels, then dispose of them somewhere. That's our journey map. And if we're really studying this, we would start putting numbers and costs and experiences all the way through it. So let's look at this from the company's point of view. All they want really is clean trucks. But what kind of hassles or problems do you see that they would face through this journey? Any ideas? What about at the very beginning? Buying and storing. You've got to have space for the storage, and of course if you're looking at that from an accounting lens, there's money tied up in inventory right there. Someone's got to organize a bid or an order from contractors and look at their bids and sift through. Mixing, this is probably the lowest person on the totem pole who's actually mixing these chemicals. Errors are going to keep coming in, very likely. Storage, again at the end, safety issues, and probably legal risk on disposing, whether it's disposed safely and whether you've got remaining liabilities. A lot of hassle, a lot of cost. All you want is clean trucks. Now let's look at it from the point of view of the small companies that actually ship these chemicals for detergents for cleaning. Do you think that would be an attractive business? Looking at business viability now, do you think that would be a great place to go into business? What do you think the economics of that business look like?
Not very good.
Why?
Because you've got risk and you're dependent on prices that other people have. You've got to add some sort of value beyond just taking it from one place to another. Anyone can do that. It's an easy entry-level market for any group to get into.
Great, so it's easy to get into, there's no special skill set, there's no barrier to entry would be the way we'd put it. And it's commoditized, so it's going to be sold on price. And if you've got a really good price and margin, other people would come in. If you're only just making a living on this damn thing, well, maybe they won't come in, but don't count on it. So it's probably a pretty lousy business, and it's not attractive to the customer. Well, one company has made a fortune in this space, and they brought new technology to bear, but they were focused on the problem, not the technology. It's called ChemStation. Now this is what they did. They said, we will go to these customers and we'll put this resin tank on their property. And we say, we will retain ownership of this tank, so you don't have to buy it. just agree that it can be stored on your property. In exchange, we'll come around and we will develop a custom formulation absolutely geared to your operation. Test it. When you're really happy with it, we'll lock that in. Now, they had a very simple innovation for that, not unlike some of these large restaurants that have all the tubes coming from wine bottles and they just pour wine out. They have 16 different basic chemicals, tubes coming from them, a little microprocessor that's programmed. When you go to factory X, this is the mix you want, and then out it comes, that custom mix, as cheaply and as cost efficiently as shipping barrels. Then they have a little remote monitoring device that just monitors when this thing is coming down, and when it comes down below a certain level, they'll kick in a reorder to send out the truck and refill the tank. And of course, that shipping guy now can see where all his reorders are, so logistically, you can have a very efficient delivery system to all the different factories. Now look at it from the customer's point of view. All they have to do now is clean. They don't have to order anything. That's now become like a utility. This company just keeps coming back and filling it up, and as long as they don't charge a fortune, you've no reason to move, no reason to change. You've got no disposal problem. In fact, their major marketing push is in terms of reduced liability to environmental risk. And then the chem station people who put this out there, they then figured out, well, once we got this working and they've proven it, this is a great franchise business. Because the only thing now you need is a really good local operator who cares about what they're doing. So they've franchised that out, so that's now creating an income stream that's letting them grow. And the next guy who wants to come in and compete has to persuade the factory owner, now let me put my tank right where the other person's tank is. Now, what I love about this case is it's not an obvious starting point. If you were starting out, thinking about where's a great entrepreneurial opportunity, it's not obvious that it's going to be in commodity cleaning of trucks and factories, although that's a colossal market, massive market. But by taking some very simple technology and applying an awful lot of design sense to the problem and figuring out what the customer really wants and then putting together a viable business model, they've come up with a great business that is profitable now but will be years into the future. So what are some actual takeaways here? Well, one is it really helps to visualize things. The other professionals who are really good at dealing with ambiguous problems that are hard to solve are detectives, FBI agents. Think about it. You start with a crime, you've got almost no information, no suspects. Very tempting to do an intuitive guess at the first guy who's a pattern match with what you think is a likely suspect. But a really good cop displays all the information. You've seen it endless times on television. They have maps of the people, of the events, and they put it up on the screen. There's a good reason for doing that, and that is because our short-term memory is very feeble. That's why we found 17 times 23 very hard. It's very hard for us to memorize those little, very simple operations. 7 bits of information plus or minus 2. That's how much we can store up here in very short-term memory. So put it up on sheets of paper. I mean, that is so simple to do. It seems obvious, but it nearly always helps. So I'd urge you in your team projects, when you're working at this ideation stage, to begin with a problem, not a solution. Find out among team members who's got an observational advantage. That means who has access to a person or a company that's got a real problem, and they can observe and get information on it. That's usually a great starting point. And when you're on a fast timeline like you are, that speeds everything up very quickly. What they find with really good entrepreneurs is they don't start with blank sheets of paper. They start with who they know, and who they are. Who they are can be what they're passionate about. who they know can be places that they can observe, and what they know is the expertise they bring. So when you match those three things together, you're going to have probably the optimal place for you to begin. But it may not be the best place for the person next to you. If I came up with a great entrepreneurial game, like Monopoly, but it's for startups, let's say, and it's fantastic. You've got people losing a fortune and mortgaging their houses, and their wives are leaving them, and it's a disaster, and you've got other people who are making fortunes, and they're on the cover of Business Week, or even better, USA Today, and they're wearing hoodies and giving presentations to banks, and they're rich beyond measure. And you've got everything in between, and you've got to play this game. Okay, well, let's say someone's developed that, and it really works, and it's not, maybe it's a board game, or maybe it's a computer game. What do you do with it? Well, what they find in every case with really skilled entrepreneurs is the answer differs depending on who they are. If it was me, I would take it to education, because that's what I know. And I would think, yeah, that's all changing very fast. We're now getting these opportunities for free online courses that are really good and effective and disruptive. But a simulation like this, that would really fit in great for teaching design thinking and entrepreneurship. That's where I would go with it, because it's my passion, my interest, who I know. My son, he would probably say, youngest son certainly would, that's a game. You know, I know games. I'm going to make a game out of that, and I'm going to take that viral, and it'll become a social game, and I'll have real money, and then people can buy opportunities from me, just like they do in Second Life. And that could be a great model. And we'd probably both be right. So part of the beginning step is to take an audit of who you are, what you know, and what you care about. That's tough for a team, because it means you probably have to defer to someone. But that's always the tough thing in any team, is deferring. But I would urge, start with an observational advantage, find someone who's got a great problem that really matters to them, then understand that problem and map it out. And really what it is kind of playing poker, not chess, is the way to put it. In the game of chess, if you're really good, I'm not at all, but if you were, the opening move determines all the other moves. So they kind of classify moves by different strategies by what the opening gambit is. So you've pretty much cast the die in chess right at the beginning. And an awful lot of startups, I think, make that mistake. They develop an idea, they develop a business plan, they've got an awful lot of money that's needed to launch and make that plan work. And then they find they're committed to that. And if you get a very high valuation, you're especially committed to that. You've got to try and make that 45-degree ramp to the moon that you've promised everybody. And angel investors want a 10-to-1 return in a short period of time, 7 or 8 years. About 5 would be nice. That's extremely hard to get. Now poker, if you think about it, poker's a game quite the opposite, where you make as little commitment early on as you can. You play cheap to just stay in the game. Then the really good poker players, when they get a really good hand, that's when they want to really make a big bet. So they make few but big bets when the odds are hugely on their favor and when they can calculate their odds. They've still got a huge amount of chance going backwards and forwards. Now with entrepreneurship, that's much more like poker. To begin with, you've got almost nothing. You maybe persuade yourself you've got an awful lot. But to begin with, you've got very little. And then when you find a pressing problem and you find a potential way that you could resolve that problem, then you've got something. It's still not much, but you've got something. You know the website where they sell for hundreds of thousands of dollars really good business ideas? No, it doesn't exist. That's right. No one on the free market pays hundreds of thousands of dollars for really good business ideas. Some angels do, but there is no website that lots of people would offer them, but there's no buyers because it takes much more than a good idea to get to a business. So I want to finish up by hawking an approach that I think is absolutely fantastic and tailor-made for you guys, by a guy called Stephen Blank, the Startup Owner's Manual. And Stephen Blank has a website that's got the easiest address to remember, steveblank.com. Now, who is this guy and why do I think he's so great? Well, he's a serial entrepreneur in Palo Alto. There's lots of those. He's had cratered failures and he's had dramatic successes. But what he's done is he's kind of piggybacked a little bit on all the research that shows that startups are not small, big companies. And that startups have to have a process that matches how you search to discover a business model. Big companies have business models and they replicate them. Small companies have to discover one. And the cheaper you can discover it, the better. That's like playing poker. You want to stay in the game inexpensively. You don't want to squander your limited stakes on bad bets. You want to make small bets until the odds are in your favor, then you want to make big bets. Well, that's pretty much how he approaches entrepreneurship. Now, once you've got a user with a problem, and you figure you've got some means to address that problem, your next step is, how do I make a business out of that? And a lot of people think, well, then you shift to planning. Then I go and develop a business plan. No, you've got a lot of legwork to do before you really develop a business plan. Now, the approach that, can you hand some of those out? My eyesight's not good enough to read this, but I think that many of you can. Now, this diagram is called a business model canvas, and it's developed by Alex Osterwald, who's from Switzerland. Brilliant young guy. I call him young. He's in his mid-30s. And it's actually very simple. But the benefit of this plan is that it really, this canvas, is you can put it up on a wall. You can get a PDF on this if you just Google business model canvas. And then you can print out this kind of canvas on a wall. It really tells you what are all the blocks that you need to have an answer to. And the first place to begin is, what's your value proposition to a customer segment? Who are your customers? Don't say what we see all the time in the angel fund, this is a $600 billion market, we're going to get 2% of it. That's just fantasy talk. You know, far better is to say, we have a customer at 248 Shinden Boulevard who's willing to buy 40 units. That's where you should be with a startup. Okay, so you want your customer segments. Well, who's like that customer? You know, and what do they really like? And what's your value to them? Really understand and whittle down. It may be quite different from what you initially imagined. When you've got your value proposition, your customer segment, you then say, okay, well, what's my channel? How do I get to that segment? And I find this gets missed a lot. There's huge costs involved as you start selling things, and there's huge erosion in margins as you start sharing margins with distributors and retailers. So channel strategies are very important, and probably one of the last things to really ramp, because that's when your costs go through the roof, when you really ramp your channels. But now there's lots of alternatives. We can go direct on the internet, but we've got a different cost structure. Now we've got to think about, you know, what's the cost of customer acquisition? Why is anyone going to come? We can go through affiliates, which is a very trendy thing these days, but often a very attractive idea. We can have some mix and match of online and offline. And what's our relationship? Are we going to develop direct, personal, one-on-one relationships? Or are we going to go, you know, like Costco does, really not much personal relationship, but we have a relationship through a membership, through our return policy, through our purchasing criteria that we give to our buying agents. All that builds a relationship. So what's the nature of that? And then when we put these together, we have a revenue stream. We have dollar amounts. And that's where we might think about our business model. How are we going to make profits? Well, 10 years ago, 95% of people would say we're going to make it on sale. We're going to sell these things. The customer's going to take ownership, and we're going to have a margin there. That's our profit. That's our business model. But now we've got people giving away things free, like Google. You know, Google Maps, phenomenal facility, really incredibly valuable. I use it all the time, and it costs me nothing. 25% of the revenue on mobile computing comes from maps. That's why Apple's willing to risk showing all its customers they really don't care about them by swapping Apple Maps for Google Maps, because they don't want Google anymore to have that revenue. You should really study European history if you want to study business. It's much more reflective than American history. You know, American history is 13 states to sea to shining sea. No one ever invaded it. European history is shifting alliances, countries falling, boundaries changing, chaos reigning, and then new hordes come over the horizon. That's what business looks like today, much more like that. And then you work back on the back end, and you think of key activities, key resources, and key partners. Now, there's a lot of creativity that can go into this, and it often gets underutilized in terms of where we put our mind. I knew Steve, 35 years ago, 30 years ago. He was a young HP control engineer working down in a shack by the river, basically, down in Garden City. He had a wood stove and a one-write checkbook, and he had 0 defects next door that could make things. Okay, so what are his costs? Next to nothing. He's got a salary, he's rented space, he's not hired anyone. He brought HP people in at night and the weekend to work on his projects. Incredibly creative, very appealing to my Scottish values. You know, try and be creative in not using cash. You know, we're all about this Silicon Valley venture capital idea. Here's my plan. Now I've got to raise $5 million because that's what I need for my plan. Try and figure out how to be creative to do something really cheaply. Think about, and what I love about Steve Blank's model is he says, get the minimal product to market. That's like a prototype. Great designers work with prototypes and get feedback. So what's the minimal definition product you can get to market, the cheapest, and then learn and learn and learn from doing that. And try and do it at absolute minimum cost. Fire anyone in the team who says, first we have to have a $10,000 logo, and then we have to have, you know, a building in a prestigious part of the city that's going to reflect our position and our status. Keep firing those people until you're down to someone who just wants to deliver a product to a customer. Because that's when you can start calling yourself a business person, is when you've got someone who's parting with cold, hard cash. Now, the way Steve Blank does this, and he's been teaching this startup program at Columbia, Stanford, and Berkeley, that's all prestigious. Even more prestigious, in my view, is the National Science Foundation have now said anybody who gets a science commercialization grant has to take his workshop, because it's basically hypothesis testing. He says, fill this out with Post-its. And then he says, every one of these is a guess, right? Now, how do you manage risk? You manage risk by turning guesses into a verified business plan at the lowest cost. That's how you manage risk. And his motto is, get out of the building. The answer is never in the building. Talking to each other will not get you this developed. It will get developed by getting out of the building and testing it with customers. So you've got to verify your business model before you really seek investment. That's the best advice you can ever get, I think, with entrepreneurship. You'll save an awful lot of money, and you'll have an awful lot of cheap trials. If you go to the business plan model, and you'll start believing your own plan and believing you have to have that money and you can't lose on it, and most of them do lose on it and come back for more money, and then that's much harder to get. And if you've also maxed out your credit cards because you can't lose on this, and got your relatives to invest because the first round is friends, fools, and family, then you're in a world of hurt when this starts going wrong. You know, so, you know, there's a lot of glamour to entrepreneurship, but there's a lot of pain and misery in folks who fail, particularly at that part of their life when failure is very expensive on other people who maybe hadn't bought into this idea. Partnerships are another area to look at. You know, partnerships obviously can be suppliers, and they can be people who have marketing relationships with the customers you want, but your product doesn't compete with that. Maybe you can form an alliance to reduce costs, to increase ramp. Maybe it can include the customer as a partner. I think this is a massively ignored area. But a lot of big companies have pressing problems that they can't easily address themselves. And if you've got a solution to what is a huge pressing problem for them, they may give you your initial orders, which is the same as getting initial startup money. So, here's some resources. I emailed them to Carrie, and I think somebody's doing a blog, so they should find their way to their website. But the best resource is really this guy's URL, steveblank.com. And here's the deal. There's this manual, which I think is terrific. This is really step-by-step with checklists. For those of you who are engineers who love processes, don't like ambiguity, this is a great way of having a process through a really ambiguous activity. The other thing he has is that he's just put out, just this month, a free course that he's done with Udacity. Now, Udacity is a spin-off from Stanford, where they're putting courses that were taught at Stanford, they're putting them online. Typically, they're not long lectures, they're 5 or 10-minute videos, followed by a quick quiz or a quick question or a quick assignment. And mostly, he wants you to develop your business idea as you take the course. So you can take that course for no fee. That's what I think is amazing. I'm going to take the course because I want to see how that's done. And I'll always learn from it. On his website, you'll find that course and how to enroll in it. You'll find this book, which I think is a great resource. And you can also find all his presentations. Just work through one of them, and it gives you, much better than I can, a kind of a roadmap of how to test drive your business model before you seek investments. Now, when you seek investments from, let's say down the road, you're going to the Boise Angel Fund, and you're seeking $100,000, let's say, of investment. What's going to be their mindset? Well, that shouldn't be where your seed money comes from to begin with, because that money should really be for a business that's been verified, that has customers, but now needs money to ramp. And you can't get enough money from your existing business to do that ramp. But you've removed most of the uncertainty about whether there's a market, whether there's paying customers, whether you can deliver something of value. And then you want to seek that money. You want to have, if you've really mapped out this business model, you'll be in great shape. But you mostly should have been wearing out shoe leather, verifying the model, and learning and pivoting. Pivoting means you change a major assumption on the model from your experience with the customer. So it's really a form of active learning. And if I'm going to summarize the takeaway from this is think slowly. Don't get tempted to just go with your first intuitive hunch and then just wrap everything around that, because the chances are it's going to be wrong. Have hunches by all means, but don't get locked into the first one. And ideally start with a problem, a pressing problem, and slow down the development of ideas until you really understand the customer and you understand where you and how you can make a big difference in their lives. And ideally, it should be the kind of customer who, when they hear what you're going to do, is going to say, I want to buy that now. I want to buy your first release that you do this. I want to beta test this with you. That's the kind of commitment you're really looking for and the kind of solving you want to get. Then when you've got that, then by all means start thinking out how you're going to develop this further, but I would start test driving a business model now. Now you've Now it only works if you can actually make a profit, if you can find a way of getting to market cheaply, if you can find a way of keeping your costs very low. So although every business plan looks like a 45-degree slope to the NASDAQ, what they really look like are S-curves. So typically the early stage is a long, fat, slow beginning where you're learning what customers want and you're adapting what you do to what they want. And the best thing is to try and do that as cheaply as you possibly can. If you've raised a lot of money and then you have a flat S-curve, you've got a lot of frustrated investors. So you want to try and do that S-curve on your own dime, do it as cheaply as you can. Then when you've verified it and you're ready to ramp, that's when it's really useful to bring in angel investors and other people with money. So that would be my 2 cents. You've got some wonderful people working with you on this program. So I'm really looking forward to it. I should say a couple of words about the Boise Angel Alliance and what we can bring. We had a vote on Tuesday night whether to make an investment in this fund and whether we thought we wanted to spend time and effort on it. And the vote was, I think, 1 against, everyone else in favor. I don't know why the 1 was against. And that was probably because Steve spoke up on it. But we had 2 funds, and initially it was the new fund, the Treasure Valley Angel Fund, that proposed it. But the Boise Angel Fund, there's still a little money left. They said, we'd like to do this too. And Tony Hauser volunteered to be a mentor. Tony is a wild man. He's a serial entrepreneur, lots of good ideas, lots of contacts. He'll tear your business plan apart, but that's useful. That's actually useful. And he's got a lot of contacts. Between the 2 of us, we can access all the other members of the Alliance. So when you work out where your problem area is, if you want to know who's an expert in that area, we may be able to help you. If it's in software, or if it's in food, or if it's in one of the industries our members have had experience in. And then when you get much further down the pike and you're really ready to raise money, we can tell you what they look for. But when it comes to financing your business, I would really look at the cheap and do-it-yourself model as far as you possibly can before you bring in extra money. Too many people think, I've got to raise seed money first. Then you spend all your time trying to raise money, when it should be time you spend working with customers and building your business up. So that's who the Angel Fund is. We're delighted to partner with you guys and with Faisal and the mentors and the Chamber of Commerce and everybody here. We don't expect to get rich on this. We just hope to get the entrepreneurship gene more widely dispersed. That's our goal. Thank you.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
So it seems to me, if I'm an attorney, I would not necessarily be a very creative person. Not that attorneys here are pretty well creative. But how do I become the Steve Hodges, right? How do I come up with good ideas all the time? It seems to be, is that something that you can train your brain? Is it something that you could, how does it develop?
Okay.
At that point where you're doing that?
Actually, Steve's just left, and he's a modest guy, so he probably wouldn't. But I saw how he actually did it, and he did it first in the way designers do, with really cheap prototypes to begin with. And many of them were wrong. He had one early idea. He was control electronics, so he started off with a wonderful background that he knew control electronics when nearly all the other devices were expensive mechanical devices. Okay, so the whole world's his oyster. But he knows control electronics. He doesn't know anything else. And he starts off by looking at Honeywell and saying, well, these damn controllers that control air conditioning and heating, they're very expensive and they're old technology. And I can do a better, cheaper one with a little microprocessor, and it'll save a lot of money. And he built one of those. He got Elmer's to run it, the breakfast people. And after 7 months, it was a big hit. It had paid back. And he said, now what about the order? And they said, yeah, we just placed one with Honeywell. So he learned something fantastic. You know, to that customer, they weren't about to take a risk with a startup in Garden City. That didn't make any sense. You know, Honeywell, they knew they were going to be there in 4 years. They knew they got a service guy who's going to come around. They're in the breakfast business, not not doing optimal purchases and taking risks on air conditioning. So the rest of his career has been quite different. He's not come up with the great ideas that have made a lot of money. He's partnered with people who've got problems. So he partnered with Computrol. Now Computrol were, you know, that was a company that made fish finders. That's a 10x problem. Think of a guy who's fishing in, you know, Minnesota, and they've got a short summer, and he's out on the lake, and he spent $5,000, $10,000 on his boat, you know, and it really matters that he catches fish. What is the value of finding where the shoals of fish are? Huge. That's a 10x problem. I'm talking about you, Steve. They said, he wants to know how to be like Steve Hodges. And I said, well, the key is Steve partnered with people who knew problems, right? Yeah. That's right. And then he partnered with the irrigation people, right, who had control problems. They didn't have a clue about how to do the remote control that Steve could figure out. So those big pivots, you know, can be controlled remotely. And a farmer, instead of having to go out on a Sunday morning and check the pivot's still running over the horizon, he can now just look at his screen, yeah, the pivot's running fine. Then when he got all those pivots, Idaho Power wanted a way of shutting off farmers and doing a contract with them, because that's the alternative to that is a jet engine down off Mountain Home. There's a jet engine. When you go to Mountain Home, look on the left, there's an Idaho Power building. It's got a jet engine in it. And that just goes on during peak times to give an extra boost of electricity to meet that peak. It's a fascinating problem, the utility challenge. They can't store electricity. It's got to be there when we want it, and it always is. But that's incredibly expensive. So to shut off farmers who use a ton of electricity to pump water up into the sky is a much cheaper solution for Idaho Power than is the jet engine. But they don't know the technology to make that work. Steve does. So Steve's done it through partnerships. And that's a great idea. If you have deep knowledge in an area and you're flexible, find people who really have a problem. Don't try and build sales, marketing, distribution channels to all those people. But that's one approach. There's many approaches to being a successful entrepreneur. Someone else who's great at the sales side, marketing side, and is in front of people all the time, they just need to start hooking up with those guys who know the technology but don't know the problems. You know, you can bring problems to them and then take those prototypes to market. That's a great place to be an entrepreneur. But don't try and do it yourself. Hook up. There was a great little workshop that the College of Engineering put on at Boise State last summer. And they brought in a guy, I forget his name now, fascinating guy who's made lots of toys that have little microprocessors. And they kind of talk and laugh and do little things that kids find funny. But his, you know, he wants like $5. Well, he was looking at all these little gizmos now that are like $2 or $3 each. And he said, think about it. These cell phones are now selling in the hundreds of millions a year. So the components have come down to next to nothing. And now with the new Bluetooth, it's dirt cheap to have remote things happening and putting things together that can monitor, that can respond, that can react. But the people who can do all that usually don't know what the real problems are. They'll come up with something silly. You know, maybe not. Maybe 1 in 1,000 would work. But much better for them to partner with people who know the channels, who know an industry, know a market, and go to those people. Network. You will be amazed when you make phone calls how many people are willing to give you time just because they love to talk about what matters to them. I say that's my constant pitch when I was a professor to my students. It's good to get a good grade in this class. When it comes to getting a great job, it won't make a difference. What will make a difference is get out of the classroom and wear out shoe leather, talking to people, finding out where the jobs are, Do information interviews. Don't just go saying, begging people to give me a job. You know, ask to meet with a manager and saying, I'm interested in your field. Can you tell me if you were my age, where would you look? What would be interesting to you? They can't help themselves. People love talking about what matters to them. And almost no one says no. Steve Jobs, when he was 12 years old, called up Hewlett and said he wanted to make, I forget what it was, but could he spare some parts for him? And he was the head of HP. And he laughed and said, sure, and got some parts mailed to him and gave him a summer job. And he said, the thing is, 99% of people would never make the call. I think it's a higher percentage than that. Yeah. But you've got to get over that if you want to be an entrepreneur. You have to get out the building. You have to hook up with people. It's the one thing you have to be able to do is sell. Because you have to sell investors, you have to sell customers, you have to sell employees. They're all taking risks, usually unreasonable risks. And they're going to make an intuitive bet on you. Do you have integrity? Are you passionate? Are you listening? Are you thinking? Are you responding? You know, if you're doing all those things, you'll get partners. Yeah. Don't try and do it all yourself. You know, that's, I think. So you don't have to be incredibly creative. A lot of good entrepreneurs are just active. You know, they'll try lots of cheap things and then they're playing poker. Go with those that seem to work and then bet on those. And then you never know where the next step is going to be. You know, the eventually successful business almost never looks like the initial conception of what the business is going to be. Does that fit with your experience, Faisal? Yeah. How about you?
Oh, I thought that was all great. I mean, I've never had a great idea, but you know, trying to find people that have problems and working with them to solve a problem, that's the way to go.
There's an instructive lesson on, I forget the name of the company, but there's one company that owns about 90% of the market for mousetraps in the United States. And on NPR, they had a great little interview with the product manager of that company. And he said every month he's inundated with new proposals for mousetraps. And he says that some of them are amazingly intricate. One involved going up a staircase and falling into a pail of antifreeze. And another was cyanide gas tablet. All these things. And he said, and the interviewer said, well, do any of them work? He said, oh, they all work. They all kill mice. He said, well, would you use any of them? Oh, no. The regular little mousetrap works fine. Mice are the easiest creatures in the world to kill. They search their environment several times in any 24 hours. They sniff, and they'll bite at anything that's in a mousetrap. So a regular little, $2 mousetrap works just fine. He said, the problem isn't actually killing mice. The problem's disposing of the mice. That's really the job to be done. And so, the real innovation was this little plastic thing like a claw that you set by just pulling down on the claw, put the food in the trap, and then when it's shut, you just take that to the garbage can and dispose of the mouse. Now that's a real innovation, because you're adding some value where there was a shortage. But actually killing the mouse, no big deal. But he said, these people have fallen in love with their ideas. Some of them are brilliant, incredibly complicated. So if you have a better idea, you will fall in love with it. But it makes it actually harder sometimes to get your business rolling. So yes, let's try and find a customer with a problem. Think about where you've got an observational or contact advantage. It's not going to be random. There's a huge density of new ideas in Silicon Valley. We're not Silicon Valley. But we do have a lot of activity in the food industry. We have a lot of activity in the electronics and conductor area. And there's going to be opportunities there. There can be opportunities in cleaning vehicles. It won't be obvious to begin with. But if you really find a big problem, then there's a good chance. You may need several. I mean, it's seldom the first bet that works in poker. So the same is going to be true here. You're going to have to do it multiple times. Okay, we done?
Yeah, thank you so much.
Well, thanks, Michael. I'm looking forward to it.
I really appreciate it. One of the reason why Professor Glenn, or
Roy.
not sure what, Roy, you respect that. One of the things that we want to do when we first started this program was to incorporate some education into it, which is why it's so great to have you, and we're really fortunate to have you as part of this and helping us out, especially at this stage where it's so, we're looking for those creative ideas and trying to come up with stuff. And the other reason it's great to have Roy as well, and even Steve Hodges, who's part of the Boise Angel Alliance and the Treasure Valley Angel Alliance, is that we wanted to connect the dots. We wanted to bring all the different organizations together and be a bigger organization so we can reach out to more people and have more of an ecosystem. And now having the Treasure Valley Angel Alliance or Angel Fund and the Boise Angel Fund together with us as partners, I think we're doing exactly that. We're really reaching out. We're really becoming a part of a bigger solution in this Treasure Valley. And one of the things that had always come up last year when we were talking, when I was talking to my group, was that we don't have. What do we do once we get something up and running? And then what? Where do we go to pitch our idea and try to get some more money? I mean, they wanted that kind of thought process to be resolved, and so I think it's there. You know, the Angel Alliance is going to be a part of what we're doing, and going to see what we're doing, and be instrumental in what we come up with, and you know, that could be an opportunity down the road to get more money. I think that's really important. Right now, with the Angel Alliance and both the Boise Angel Fund and the Treasure Valley Angel Fund, it's the total take is $55,000. That's a huge number. That's a huge amount of money for us to start a company. I mean, we started with 25 last year, and you can see how it's growing incrementally, and I think it's going to continue to grow. So I think we're really fortunate, again, to have Roy and all the other organizations playing a part in this whole thing. I think we've recorded this, so there are going to be people who can access this as well. There's going to be a link that's going to be sent out to people.
Yeah,
right?
on YouTube.
I would also encourage. I actually went to Yassi, and I thought it was really cool, and everybody should get on there and actually encourage other people to get on there and take a look and take some of the courses, and also some of the information that he's handed out.